This is my second year. Last year was my first. So a
Okay.
year and a half in.
How long have you been teaching in general?
Started teaching, I want to say 2001 was the first year I taught, so I'm a little bit over 20 years. It's tough for me to evaluate that as I started off in Massachusetts. I spent 4 years teaching there, then I spent 16 years teaching in southern Maine, and now 2 years in northern Maine. So a lot of the changes I've seen could be geographic more than they are state to state. So, but in terms of generations, here's what I saw when I first started teaching in Massachusetts. Interesting, because that was the first time I actually experienced the difference in cultures. And what I mean by that is, when I grew up here in northern Maine, we played with stuff. We built tree houses. We took our bikes apart. We took lawnmowers apart. We are up here in northern Maine. Kids have very good intuition when it comes to physics, mechanics, because they played with their entire life. I remember in Massachusetts when I first started teaching rotational motion, it hit me that these kids have never played with a bicycle. They've never taken a bicycle apart. They've never done anything like that. So at first I was like, wow, I got to give them tactile experiences. But then as time has gone on, I'm thinking less and less, this wasn't a Massachusetts phenomenon. This is actually a generational phenomenon. Where now what I'm seeing is that the students are very digitally adept. They're very, very good at that. They don't have as much experience with real world phenomenon. So as a teacher, I have to try to come up with ways to provide that. So what I've really seen in a lot of ways, students are more technologically savvy than we've ever seen. They got less and less experiences in the real world. And what's fascinating, there's a study that was done at the Concord Consortium, and they actually found that, if you notice in class we're using FET simulations. These digital simulations are actually as effective, in some cases more effective, than actually real world labs. So as a teacher, for me as a science teacher, I'm sitting here going, okay, how much do I gear my labs and experiences in real world phenomenon? And when is it just better to go with FET and it's actually more effective? So yeah, it's changed. Yeah, in terms of digital savviness, yes, the students have gotten much more digitally savvy, and the cost has been real world intuition, real world experience. Oh, it's been horrific. The effects are, as a teacher, I think right now, in my honest opinion, right now, most students are about a year behind. And it's not their fault. I mean, we did the best we could. But we basically lost the end of, I think it was 2019. We lost the end when it first broke out. We lost the end of that year. So most schools lost the third. And then that year when we came back, that hybrid learning, that was, in terms of students' emotional health, I think it was the right call to make. In terms of their educational development, it was probably the worst call we could have made. But it was a tough call. I mean, what do we do? So
50-50.
50, yeah. And I did. So COVID, I actually experienced COVID. It started downstate. So I was in basically just south of Portland at that time. So I experienced it there. And if I'm being honest, it probably played a large role where I actually moved back home. That was, it was one of those things where you sit there and go, what really matters in life? I was seeing my parents maybe twice a year. For what?
Yeah.
So, that played a large role in why I wanted to come back home, why I wanted to move back to the county. I mean, I get to see my parents now, God, at least once a week. So, and actually just yesterday, I actually went to visit my parents yesterday. I hadn't seen them for like 2 weeks, and it felt like forever. So yeah, it definitely had obviously it had a negative impact on society, but it definitely had a very negative impact on education.
So,
Okay, what's the best situation to teach in? With the kids who want to learn.
based on what happened.
To me, students who want to learn is everything. I will tell you, actually, I actually do this. I actually remember this happened about 4 years ago. I remember this was my perfect lesson. It was when I felt the best about teaching my students. It was very interesting. We were doing an activity, and I use whiteboards. And it was very interesting because at that point we had a circle of students. They were talking to each other, and I sat back and I just stepped back for about 5-10 minutes, and they were figuring it out on their own. They didn't even need me. They'd learned so much, and I was so proud of them. And it sounds weird to say my best teaching moment is when I was irrelevant and not needed anymore. I was just sitting there, and I was, of course, asking questions, but watching them solve it themselves. And it was just one of those where, so what do I want in a classroom? Students who want to learn. Students who it's not about grades. It's about let's figure out what's happening in the real world. That's the fun part of teaching, is you'll learn something, it'll work really well, but then generations change. It's not the students, their product and their environment. The society is changing too. So it's kind of, a lot of ways, it's part of what makes the job so much fun, is that every year is a new challenge. So basically the advice I would give a new teacher is be flexible. Be ready to adapt to generations. God, when the pandemic hit, we had to learn how to adapt. So as a teacher, don't be too rigid in any of your paradigms. Be ready to question them, be ready to adjust and be flexible. Most awesome job. It is. I was a cancer researcher before I went in this job, and best transition ever made. There's not a better job out there.
Right.
Salary isn't the best. I'm not going to lie to you there. You know, it's fair. You can get
Yeah.
by. But as in terms of a job and just job satisfaction, I can't imagine doing anything else. It is an awesome job.
Thank you.